Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira. Over the next half an hour or so, we're going to bring you a roundup of all the international stories that have taken place through the course of the week. Let's begin, as always, with the latest headlines. Obama unveils U.S. immigration reform, setting up a fight with Republicans. President urges immigrants to come out of the shadows. Republicans claim that he is acting illegally by moving unilaterally. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has dissolved parliament, paving the way for a snap election. Japan will now head to polls in mid-December. Deadly attack in holy city of Jerusalem leaves 4 dead and 8 injured. 2 Palestinian suspects shot dead by the police. Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel will hit back with a heavy hand. And major diplomatic victory for India. 5 Indian fishermen on death row in Sri Lanka released after presidential pardon. Our top focus this week. He's waited 6 years, but finally US President Barack Obama announced the biggest overhaul of the immigration system in years. He used his executive powers to announce a series of administrative measures to provide legal status to more than 5 million illegal immigrants in the country. Bypassing Congress on this issue, Obama has set himself up with a clash with angry Republicans who now control both chambers of Congress.
Nearly 5 million people living illegally in the US can escape deportation under sweeping changes to the US immigration system. Come out of the shadows and get right with the law, urged President Barack Obama in a televised address.
The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half-century. And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill.
Republicans say that the action without Congress is beyond his authority and relations will now be poisoned. There are about 11 million illegal immigrants in the US, and this year children coming across the border prompted a crisis. Most of those affected by Obama's action are the parents of children who are US citizens or legal residents. The president told the nation that what he is proposing is not amnesty.
The real amnesty. Leaving this broken system the way it is. Mass amnesty would be unfair. Mass deportation would be both impossible and contrary to our character. What I'm describing is accountability. A common-sense middle ground approach. If you meet the criteria, you can come out of the shadows and get right with the law. If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up.
Although the plan will allow millions to work, it won't offer a path to citizenship or entitle them to the same benefits as Americans. Administration officials described Obama's actions as the biggest shift in immigration policy since the 1986 changes by President Ronald Reagan.
Joining me for a chat this week on the program is former diplomat Yogender Kumar. Very welcome to our program, and let's talk about this particular immigration policy of President Obama. You know, it's likely to affect or impact the lives of close to 5 million people. But how is it really going to impact these people's lives?
Well, as I said, the figure who might benefit from this could be about 5 million. That's what President Obama said in his speech. Basically, what it amounts to is that he's proposing a 3-year deferment of the deportation proceedings against these people, giving them the right to vote, right to work legally. And apart from that, I mean, the people who would be covered under this are undocumented parents of U.S. citizens or people with legal permission to live, or undocumented residents who actually came to U.S. when they were under 16 years of age. Along with that, he's also proposing, which actually is a perennial theme in the immigration debate, is to increase the financial resources so that the patrolling on the U.S.-Mexico border can be more effective. Apart from that, the other aspect which actually would have, I think we might benefit somewhat, is what is called a better streamlined process for sort of people who could be categorized as engineers or entrepreneurs. Now, in their case, because many of these people who are on H-1B visa and their application is under process for green card or permanent resident status, in their cases, they're given more flexibility to work.
Yes.
So it applies to them and also to the spouses. So that really is where we would benefit definitely much more once it comes through, and that would have to be actually amending the Immigration Act in some way, whether executive order or by whatever means. That's basically what is suggested. Of course, the deferment of deportation proceedings, the U.S. Homeland Security, Homeland Department figures are about 2.5 lakhs, which is not a very big number. And you don't know how these figures are arrived at, quite frankly. Yeah.
Right, yes. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we don't really know how these figures are arrived at because, you know, the U.S. administration is saying that there are 11 million immigrants in the United States. Now, this could only be a ballpark figure. It can't be like an accurate figure, can it?
Well, that's true. Of course, I think most of these are anecdotal figures, really, because in some cases they would have a basis to go by, which is where the cases are actually being processed by the Immigration Department, or where there are deportation proceedings underway and such things. But obviously, that number is not very large. So basically, basically, they are estimates, really.
Yes. And what kind of an impact is it really going to have on some of the Indian population there in the United States?
Well, it certainly have a good impact on the Indian population. But these particular measures are aimed really more at the Latin American population there, which is in larger numbers there, and they are actually quite strong in particular southern states. And for these, and this is a perennial election issue. Whenever the elections take place, and elections take place every 2 years. So perhaps this kind of a thing, what actually the calculation of President Obama actually is that he is hoping that at the end of 3 years, it will be further extended, and by which time perhaps something will come out in terms of whatever the immigration debate is going on presently. So I think it is really more is aimed at Latin American community there. It is a highly emotive issue for them, and they actually have a certain political weight in Southern American states.
All right. Now, you know, the Republicans are saying that Obama has acted illegally and has acted unilaterally. Now, how are we going to see the relationship between the Republicans and President Obama going forward after this?
I think that's a very good question. I think it is larger. The larger aspect, or the larger issue actually is that the American political system becomes somewhat gridlocked.
Yes.
And this is not even now, but even people are already saying that the next 2 years of President Obama really are more like a lame duck president. But I'm sure the other way, of course, is that there are executive power that the president has, and I'm sure they will know how to actually achieve this, because otherwise you can take it that the next elections, when they come, the Democrats will be completely doomed in case this particular proposal of President Obama doesn't really have an impact on the ground.
All right. And, you know, the onus now really is with the Congress, because President Obama has said now it's up to the Congress to pass the bill, really. So he's done everything that he possibly can. Now it's left up to the Congress.
Well, yes, I think that would be a different kind of a dynamic altogether. And I guess, you know, in all these debates, as you know, this is basically, you know, this kind of negotiating and bargaining which goes on between different political groups in the Congress. And there are a lot of issues which come into that. So one really has to see as to how this debate will move forward in the Congress.
And, you know, talking about another aspect of it, you know, the immigration status will be given to these immigrants, but, you know, they're not going to get many of the rights that U.S. citizens really have. They're not going to get the rights to vote, in fact, and, you know, several other rights. So it's not really going to be completely hunky-dory for all these people.
No, that's true. I think that's the whole point. I mean, because the fact that the immigration debate has become so highly politicized, that is becoming completely devoid of rationality.
Yes.
And whether it is President Obama or President Bush, when he was in power earlier, they've all said that actually in a way it's affecting the America's, you know, the dynamism in America, because as President Obama himself has said that a lot of these highly talented people come to US and they actually contribute in terms of the knowledge and technology and the economy and are actually very gainful or very sort of productive members of the American society and community. And these people are in a way being handicapped or stymied in their activities. And therefore, to that sense, if the immigration policy actually is rather, you know, what should I say, it's become quite a bit of a muddle. In that case, you know, obviously the U.S. government and the U.S. as a country are also not getting the full benefit of this.
Right. All right. We'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much, Mr. Yogender Kumar, for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, let's move on now, of course, and talk about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Australia. He wrapped his visit earlier this week with a private dinner hosted in Melbourne by his Australian counterpart, Tony Abbott. He praised the beauty of democracy that he said enabled him to meet both the ruling and opposition leaders. This was on a day when he addressed Australian MPs in a joint session of Parliament and signed 5 agreements in various areas.
My friend, Tony Abbott, congratulations to you and the people of Australia on a successful G20.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's date with the Australian Parliament coming a day after the Chinese President delivered his address to then MPs.
The third head of the government, you are listening to this.
Modi used it to have dig at China about its many disputes over the South China Sea.
Our region has seen huge progress on the foundation of peace and stability. But we cannot take this for granted. They have bitter disputes. We should collaborate more on maintaining maritime security.
Despite Australia emerging as a key source of thermal coal for India, Modi insisted that India is looking for an early closure on the uranium sale deal.
Energy that does not cause our glaciers to melt. Clean coal and gas, renewable energy are fuel for nuclear power.
Prime Minister Modi also made a trip to the cricket ground for a photo op with cricketing greats and wishing the Australian team ahead of the Cricket World Cup next year.
I wish you the best for hosting great and successful world cricket early next year.
Both Modi and Abbott also said they will push for a free trade pact. This was after Australia on Monday finalized a landmark free trade deal with China that significantly expanded ties between the world's second largest economy.
We want to go further, and that's why the next priority for Australia is a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with India.
Both sides signed 5 agreements on social security, transfer of sentenced prisoners, combating narcotics trade, tourism and arts and culture.
We also agreed on seeking early closure on the civil nuclear agreement, which will give Australia a chance to participate in one of the most secure and safe nuclear energy programs in the world.
The Prime Minister also met business leaders in Melbourne. Taking the opportunity to promote his Make in India initiative, Modi said the focus is on promoting labour-intensive manufacturing. He also stressed upon the initiatives and reforms undertaken by his government to enhance the ease of doing business in India.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but on the other side, we'll tell you all about India's diplomatic victory over Sri Lanka. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, the 5 fishermen who were sentenced to death in Sri Lanka and pardoned by Lankan President Mahinda Rajapakse returned to Chennai this week. They arrived to a rousing emotional reception in Chennai. All of them hail from Rameswaram. They were sentenced to death by a Lankan court for alleged drug trafficking.
Frantic diplomatic negotiations and a presidential pardon later, the 5 Indian fishermen who were on death row in Sri Lanka have been released. The 5 will also not be required to serve their sentence in India. The Indian High Commission in Colombo is in the process of working out the exact modalities of their release.
Reports that we are hearing about the release of fishermen are extremely heartwarming. Honorable Prime Minister Shri Modi ji has spoken to the President of Sri Lanka some time ago. The government authorities and the Ministry of External Affairs also have offered to give all kinds of possible help to the fishermen.
The move comes less than a week before the SAARC summit in Nepal. Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapakse and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will both be attending this summit. The 5 fishermen, all hailing from Tamil Nadu, were apprehended in 2011 and sentenced to death by the Colombo High Court on October 30th for alleged drug trafficking. The pardon is being claimed as a big diplomatic victory for India.
Ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has become the Prime Minister of India, one can clearly see that India's voice is taken with respect and heard. And there is a marked change in our diplomatic focus and diplomatic impact.
Now that they are released and the efforts taken by the present Prime Minister, our leader had already congratulated him, thanked him for his efforts, and now we are happy that our Indian fishermen are released.
The Colombo court's ruling had triggered fiery protests in parts of Tamil Nadu, and sporadic violence was also reported. India had filed an appeal in the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka against the verdict on November 11th. Rajapaksa and Modi had a telephonic conversation last week on the issue.
Well, chaotic scenes erupted in the holy city of Jerusalem as two armed Palestinians attacked a synagogue. They killed 4 Israelis and injured 8 others. The attackers were later shot dead by the police. Israel hit back, saying that they will respond with a heavy hand. Alarmed by the flaring violence, the United Nations called for restraint from Israel.
The bloodiest attack on a religious place in over 6 years. 2 suspected Palestinians attacked a synagogue in western Jerusalem on Tuesday. In a grisly massacre, men armed with knives and meat cleavers killed 4 people and injured 8 others before being shot dead by the police. Police officials said the assailants were cousins who came from East Jerusalem.
We heard tons of sirens of ambulances and police coming. We walked down and we heard there was terrorists came into the show here, and they with a knife and started to stab people.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Western-backed Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of inciting violence and pledged they will respond with a heavy hand.
Well, what we see here is a deliberate initiative of Abu Mazen. So he's been inciting, he's been calling on people to use acts of violence.
Abbas joined world leaders in condemning the attack that they called senseless and brutal.
Palestinian leadership must condemn this, and they must begin to take serious steps.
The military wing of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades, claimed responsibility for the killings, but police officials are yet to confirm it. Clashes broke out in East Jerusalem later as Israeli security forces moved in to make arrests. Reports suggest that Palestinian radio described the attackers as martyrs. The Islamist group Hamas praised the attack, and loudspeakers at the mosques in Gaza called out congratulations. Palestinians in Gaza distributed sweets celebrating Jerusalem's synagogue attack. Violence in Jerusalem, Israel and Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories surged last month, fueled in part by a dispute over Jerusalem's holiest shrine. It also gave rise to fears of further religious conflicts.
Meanwhile, in Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has dissolved the parliament, paving way for a snap election. He is seeking a mandate for new economic reforms after the world's 3rd largest economy slipped into recession a few days ago. Japan will now head to polls in mid-December.
日本国憲法第7条により衆議院を解散する。万歳はここでやってください。
Parliamentarians cheering Japanese Speaker's announcement of dissolving the House. Now Japan will go for snap election on December 14th. Just 2 years after returning to power, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is now seeking a fresh mandate for fresh impetus to his economic strategies.
本日衆議院を開催いたしました。この解散はアベノミクス解散であります。アベノミクスを前に進めるのか、それとも止めてしまうのか。
Shinzo Abe pledged to revive the economy with a series of reforms including new monetary policy and government spending. He also promises new strategies to control Japan's massive public debt. However, opinion polls indicate dwindling support for the Japanese Prime Minister, with people questioning why he has called elections 2 years ahead of the schedule.
景気回復、この道しかありません。そのことをこの選挙戦を通じて皆さんにしっかりと訴え続けていきたいと考えています。
大義がね、 なんかボケてるというかね、なんかちょっと小さいというかね、もうちょっと小泉首相みたいに郵政解散とかね、そういう。
It is quite evident that Shinzo Abe hopes to cement his grip on power before his support ratings dip any further. After Abe launched his ambitious economic plan, Abenomics, Japan's GDP went up initially but continued to slide later on, until it entered a technical recession this year. Abe said he would resign if his coalition failed to win a simple majority.
Moving on, now let's bring you up to date with the other news-making stories from across the world this week. Here's our latest Globe Watch.
Fresh snow fell on Thursday in snowbound western New York State, where long-time residents described the blast of winter weather as the worst in memory. At least 8 deaths were blamed on the storm. Some areas of New York along the Great Lakes had nearly 2 feet of new snow on top of accumulations as high as 5 feet from earlier in the week. The National Weather Service said parts of the region could expect 3 feet more snow before skies clear over the weekend. The United States said it is not open to extension of the 24th November deadline to resolve a 12-year-old dispute over Iran's nuclear program, despite sharp disagreements persisting between Tehran and world powers. Significant gaps remain between negotiating positions on how much capacity for enriching uranium Tehran should have and the speed at which international sanctions should be removed. The United Nations says almost 1,000 people have been killed in Ukraine since a ceasefire came into effect in September, an average of 13 people a day. The UN said 957 people have been killed in the 8 weeks since the truce amid continuing violations on both sides. A new report by the office describes a total breakdown of law and order in rebel-held Donetsk and Luhansk. It also highlights credible allegations of abuses by the government forces. France has reportedly identified a second Frenchman featured in the video showing the beheading of Syrian prisoners by Islamic State militants as Michael Dos Santos. The 22-year-old Muslim convert came from an eastern Paris suburb. The other Frenchman was identified as Maxime Hochard, a Muslim convert from Normandy. The video also showed US aid worker Abdul Rahman Kassik's severed head on the camera. About 1,000 French jihadists are believed to have traveled to Iraq and Syria to join the ranks of the Islamic State. At least 45 people have been killed in a suspected Boko Haram attack in northeast Nigeria. Mafa, which is about 50 kilometers away from the Borno state capital Maiduguri, has been repeatedly attacked by the armed group. In the latest attack, heavily armed fighters arrived on motorcycles as villagers were at work. The caretaker chairman of Mafa district called the attack wicked.
Well, let's now bring you up to speed with all the latest information from the sports arenas from across the world in our Sports Wrap.
Giancarlo Stanton has secured the biggest contract in American sport by signing a record $325 million deal with Major League Baseball's Miami Marlins. But the slugger's 13-year deal will not instantly put him among the sport's top earners, with reports suggesting the contract is heavily backloaded. 25-year-old Stanton will need to stay with Miami until the end of 2027 to realize the full amount of the deal. 17-time Grand Slam champion Roger Federer has described his spat with compatriot Stanislas Wawrinka during their ATP World Tour semi-finals as a heat of the moment. Federer said that they are friends and not enemies, and it was the result of a highly intense match. He further said that they had a conversation after the match and everyone is totally relaxed about the situation. It was claimed that the pair were involved in a heated post-match argument. Former world number 1 Rafael Nadal has said that he would return to playing tennis at the start of next year. The 14-time Grand Slam champion hasn't played since having his appendix removed this month, which forced him to miss the season-ending ATP World Tour finals. Nadal said that he would play in Abu Dhabi in January, and after that he would play his first official tournament in Doha. The Abu Dhabi exhibition tournament is scheduled for January 1st to 3rd. The Indian Grand Prix is expected to return in 2016 as a fruitful meeting between Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone and race promoters has prepared the ground for the comeback of the high-profile event. The meeting was held on the sidelines of the inaugural Russian Grand Prix in Sochi last month. The Indian Grand Prix was dropped from the 2014 calendar after 3 successful seasons owing to tax and bureaucratic hurdles. The race has already been ruled out for 2015. Formula One driver Jules Bianchi has been brought out of an artificial coma and arrived back in France on Wednesday, nearly 7 weeks after his near-fatal crash at the Japanese Grand Prix. The 25-year-old Frenchman's family said that the Marussia driver was still listed as critical and that he could remain in a serious condition for a long time.
Shifting focus now, let's bring you up to date with all the news from the world of showbiz in our latest entertainment wrap.
A new TV show of Bill Cosby has been scrapped by US TV network NBC after accusations resurfaced that he sexually assaulted women. The network asserted that the 77-year-old actor's show was no longer in development. The move came after Janice Dickinson, a model and TV presenter, said Cosby had sexually assaulted her after a dinner date in 1982. Dickinson is just one of several women to have accused the veteran comedian of sexual assault going back almost 30 years. Chris Hemsworth has been named Sexiest Man Alive of 2014 by People magazine. The Avengers star was officially anointed as the winner on Jimmy Kimmel Live. The 31-year-old actor jokingly said that the title was based on an IQ test and not just physical appearance, adding that he would like to thank his parents for putting this together. Taylor Swift has denied rumors that she has signed a deal with Google in order to make her music available on its new YouTube Music Key service. The denial was made after Billy Bragg criticized the singer for removing her entire music from Spotify. Bragg has voiced strong opposition to YouTube's new Music Key service. Swift's latest album 1989 sold some 1.3 million copies in its first week of release. Angelina Jolie is reportedly planning to give up acting as she wants to spend more time behind the camera. The 39-year-old actress told Juju magazine that she had never been comfortable as an actor and she had never loved being in front of the camera. Jolie asserted that she was grateful she had a career as an actor and she was sure she had got a few more movies left in her, but she would be very happy to say goodbye to that part of her life. Peter Segal has been signed to direct Disney's children's tale adaptation Goblins. The 52-year-old director, along with his Callahan Filmworks partner Michael Ewing, would also produce the project. The movie is based on the book penned by Ari Burke and illustrated by Brian Froud. The script for the film would be written by Tom Astle and Matt Ember, with Burke and Froud being executive producers.
And finally, of course, mascots from the previous Olympic Games arrived in the next host city, Rio de Janeiro, to visit iconic spots such as Sugarloaf Mountain and the Maracana. The official icons of this particular Olympics will be unveiled on Monday. I'm going to leave you with these visuals. Have a good week.